Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome. Today we have Ken Mondschein. I said that correctly?
You said it correctly.
PhD. He is a fencing master. And I had read an article about him. I think it was either in the Sunday Telegram or Metro West News. Not quite sure. He has a fencing business in Worcester. You can take classes there. I'm going to learn an awful lot about this today. I mean, a lot. He's also an author. To give you an example, he's written Game of Thrones and the Medieval Art of War. We'll talk about the other ones too. So you have two major talents here. You know how to do the swords. You also are
I'm also a history professor.
there he goes. Are you teaching somewhere locally?
Anna Maria College. I'm teaching at Anna Maria
Anna
College.
Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, you're originally from Brooklyn.
I'm originally from Brooklyn.
And you were telling me why did you come out here to the Worcester area?
Oh, I don't live in Worcester proper. I commute here. I actually live in Western Massachusetts.
Oh, what town?
In East Hampton. So
Grew up in Wilbraham.
You grew up in Wilbraham.
There you go. Got to go somewhere. So you make a big commute.
Yeah, I do. I do to teach fencing here at Worcester Fencing Club and also to teach at Anna Maria. Mm-hmm. So I'm out here thrice a week. So
where is the Worcester Fencing Club? Where is that located?
Worcester Fencing Club is on Stafford Street. Mm-hmm. And best way to find the location is via the web, which is worcesterfencing.com, and then my website, because it's a separate business from Worcester Fencing Club for reasons having to do with U.S., because I do, as we'll see, a slightly different sort of fencing than modern fencing, but my website is historicalfencing.org.
How did they find you to do the article? That was great. I mean, talk about something unusual. How did they find you?
Well, then the other simple way to find me is simply to Google me or historical fencing Worcester or something like that.
Somebody had a real big interest because that's amazing. I hadn't heard of it. I knew fencing, but I hadn't heard. When you came in, I asked you, are they called épées, the swords? But they're not, right?
Well, we teach several different weapons, or I should say a number of different weapons, which I have around here. Mm-hmm. So why don't I start with modern fencing weapons for show and tell, and we'll go backwards through time.
Sounds good.
So what I have here is, let's begin with this foil. And if you go and take modern fencing classes, Sid Fadner, who's a very good coach, will probably start you off with this. So this is a foil. It's got a 90 centimeter blade, very flexible, as you can see. It's square, it's completely harmless, and at the end there's an electric button. And what happens when you're actually fencing, that a cord plugs into here, goes through your wrist and out your bottom, and not literally your bottom, but out the bottom of your jacket. And
speaking of colonoscopy.
Speaking of colonoscopy, and that plugs into a scoring machine. Yeah. So that when this button makes contact with a conductive vest worn by your opponent, it's going to complete a circuit and go off. And because of the weight of that, in modern fencing weapons, we've got these pistol grips, which fit the hand just like this. So this is the foil, and there's a variety of rules specific to this weapon. Modern fencing consists of 3 events or weapons. So this one's the first, which is the foil. Also a thrusting weapon, like the foil, is the épée. Épée is a little heavier. This one has a V-shaped blade, but just like that, you've got a button on the end, and any place this hits the adversary who doesn't need to wear the lame, it'll go off. That's one of the chief differences between épée and foil. There are also some rule differences.
Does everybody wear not bulletproof, but a vest to protect?
Yes, everyone wears a protective jacket and, of course, a mask. This is all done with full protection. Have you ever seen fencing on TV?
Yeah.
There's a wonderful Happy Days clip where Fonzie says that anybody who fences without a mask just isn't cool, but then they do a choreographed fencing bout for the camera. Anyway, also, as you can see, this épée has the socket for your body cord, and it's got the pistol grip, because this really changes the weight and balance. But this is descended from the dueling weapon. This is descended from the weapon that gentlemen actually engage in duels with. Another weapon with which people would duel was the saber, which today is also electrified, but of course it's not just a thrusting weapon, but with the modern saber, because it's electrified, you can hit with any part of the weapon. You can hit with the sides, You can edge, flat, point. It doesn't matter.
Is there a difference in the handle technique?
And the handle, and yeah, well, this is more of a this is a cutting weapon.
Yeah.
So as you can see, that this has a very kind of traditional looking handle. This one's not electric. This is the practice saber, but this one's electrified.
When they didn't have electrification back in the ancient times, what they just did it.
Back in the 1980s with Saber's only electrified in the 1990s. But they used visual, I believe it was in 1992, if I can remember correctly. But they used visual judging, and of course there was chicanery with this.
Yeah.
Very often, I have a friend who was fencing in the national championships in the 1980s, and I said, and his opponent's teammates were bad, and they said, "You're doing really well, Pete, but we can't let you advance." So there was chicanery. There's a bit of chicanery.
Yeah.
Now, in historical fencing, we don't have any electrical judging equipment. Everything is done visually when we compete, but of course we don't just do it for competition, but also for fun. But I wanted to compare this. This is a 19th century, or rather a replica of a 19th century gymnasium saber, which would be the training weapon for the dueling saber.
Why the holes?
The holes are to lighten the guard.
Okay.
Also, you can use it as a colander in an emergency.
Yeah.
So you can see just how much thicker the blade is. And this is a light version of it. But this is a 19th century fencing saber. Or I should say, again, a reproduction of a 19th century fencing saber. With this, we only want to cut with the edge. It's not electrified, but we're doing this simulating as best as we can what we would be doing for training with a sharp weapon. In the same way, if we look at, I've got two foils here, which are of a classical style. Still, the blades are very similar to the modern ones, but
oh, look at that.
yeah, but you can see this one is French. It's got a slightly curved handle.
Yeah, why at the end does it curve more than this one?
It's because this one is actually meant to angulate. If you're holding it,
Yeah.
it's going to actually curve in slightly.
All right.
In keeping with the
And that's
French school. That's French.
That's the French one. Okay. I like the blue on this one.
And this one, well, that's just the pad. But what I wanted to show was the guard. This is in the Italian style, which is also a classical style. So the blade is very similar to the other one, but it also extends through the guard and is a little bit you actually hold there. And if you look at my rapier, this is my.
Whoa! Look at that.
This is a reproduction of a 17th century style of sword, but you can see they look very much alike. And the Italian schools actually had a lot of continuity
That is cool.
into the 19th century. This is the one I use for teaching.
Really?
This is a cup-hilted rapier. You can see it's got a cup hilt on it. It's more of a mid to late 17th century
Is that
style.
the one that we see on Game of Thrones? That type?
Not really so much on Game of Thrones. This would be very late for Game of Thrones. They don't really use rapiers per se on Game of Thrones.
Ooh, look at that.
But
That's primitive.
well, yeah, because we're going back in time. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say primitive, but it's actually requires quite a bit of sophisticated metallurgy
Really?
and smithing to do this. But this is a rapier. It's also very often used in conjunction. I brought my fencing dagger
two of 'em.
in conjunction with the dagger because it's a two-handed
Yeah.
weapons form. This one is a little bit early, a little earlier, late 16th, early 17th century than the other one. You can see, still the same basic form as that Italian foil.
Yeah.
Still a lot of continuity in its use. Actually, rapier fencing, really the first book we can call rapier, was Camillo Agrippa, 1553. This is my translation of it. Now, people, by far the most popular weapon with historical fencing people is the longsword. This is a longsword. You can see this is the sort of thing you can see on Game of Thrones.
Whoa.
This is the medieval weapon. You can see it's two-handed.
Catch this, Paul. This is amazing.
So it's a two-handed weapon.
Yeah.
It's we use these in competition. You have to wear a lot of protective gear when you're
Is this
fencing.
your favorite? Which is your favorite?
Well, I'm more of a. I suppose I'm sort of a rapier guy because I've really gotten tired of concussions from getting hit in the head with these.
Yeah. That looks dangerous.
But yeah, it's
Look at the end of it. It
be.
looks like it sliced you in half.
Well, it's not sharp, of course. This is a fencing sword.
Yeah.
Right. This is still a fencing sword. It's just a bigger, heavier fencing sword.
That is cool.
Now, and of course, I've written a couple of books on
tell
those.
us about the books. This is
So this is this one is the Knightly Art of Battle, and it's just a little visual tour through a manuscript of. Let's see if I can show you some images.
Can you zero in on them?
Yeah, we actually have records left mostly by Italians and Germans, though some also from Spain, a little bit from England, on how these weapons were utilized when they did it. So the aim, the method in which I teach examines these books. Here's another book I wrote. This is more of a book on use called It's Art of the Two-Handed Sword. And it's sort of more of an instructional guide.
Look at this.
It's sort of an instructional guide I wrote. Of course, a lot of that went into Game of Thrones and the medieval art of war as well. But we teach, so HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts, reconstructs this from these written records, which of course you need historian skill, but there's also living tradition. So for instance, of the weapons I teach the longsword. Well, I brought this as well. This is a baton. It's a French fighting stick. This is a living tradition.
Did you make this, or did you have?
No, this comes from France. You buy this in a little store near Père Lachaise Cemetery.
So you've been over there and you bought it there.
Well, I had a Fulbright grant to France,
Yeah.
so and they'll ship. But it's chestnut wood actually. It's
Yeah.
coppiced. It's coppiced chestnut wood, which you can't get in this country.
Oh.
You can also use them at a rattan, but that's a living French tradition, a living martial art, and it's manipulated in much the same way as the longsword is. So if you have that skill, and then also the saber, for instance, is also a living tradition. It's also a living skill. So then, if you understand the living tradition and you put the living traditions, such as the Italian school of fencing, which changed, did change, but didn't change that much, and then you can understand that, you understand fencing, and you understand the treatises, and you understand how it's different, then you can understand the rapier. If you understand the stick, and then you've got the knowledge of how to use an edge from foil and from the saber, then you can understand the longsword much better and understand the treatises much better, not to mention that the living tradition gives us a pedagogy, a way to tie it together and put it all together. In the same way, the saber is also very similar to the short cane.
Yeah, look at that.
This is a French cane
Yeah.
for doing cane fencing, because gentlemen, after they stopped carrying swords, carried walking sticks. And the last weapon I wanted to show you is the small sword. This
Now,
is
what's at the end of it?
18th century. It's just a button, so you can fence with it.
So you don't hurt someone.
So you don't hurt somebody. You like to button your weapons. We like to button our weapons. So, but of course, the practice weapon for the small sword, this 18th century weapon, would have been the foil. That's where the foil came from, the practice weapon from the small sword. And then as time went on, it got more abstracted and became more of a game. And they thought that the foil was too abstract, so they brought back épée fencing in an attempt to make fencing more quote-unquote realistic. Then, of course, épée became a game as well. And now, of course, a lot of people, do this for a lot of reasons, but very often they say they want to do a more martial form of fencing, or maybe one that's less abstracted than the the modern sport.
Yeah.
But of course, it's all a game, because unless you're actually fighting for real, which none of us will ever do.
Ken, how
It's
did
always a
you
game.
get into this?
I've always had a love for it. I really started in college.
Where'd you go?
SUNY Buffalo.
Okay.
So I got involved a lot in some medievalist groups. When I discovered that there are these living traditions and also these written sources.
And you were majoring in history, so you could teach.
And I majored in history because I loved history.
Yeah.
And I eventually got my PhD in it, and with an area of concentration in the history and culture surrounding these, which is, of course, what goes into my books and my other publications, my articles, my other things. So this is not just a personal pursuit, but this is also an academic pursuit. This is also something I do a lot of writing and educating about.
So it's your passion as well as your education for it.
It's my passion, my education, it's my profession.
How do people who have never tried this before, Ken, tell us how they can get a hold of you if they'd like to come to your classes?
Well, I'm easy enough to reach through email, ken@kenmondschein.com, or
So spell your last name, Ken.
MONDSCHEIN, or through historicalfencing.org. You can find my email on my website, or you can follow the Worcester Fencing Club pages to my website, or you can Google me, or you can Google my books. A lot of ways of getting hold of me, and I teach, of course, besides doing seminars and such around the country, I also do teach in East Hampton as well at the Pioneer Valley Fencing Academy. So I've got
Pioneer
two
Valley.
locations. Yeah. So I've got two locations.
So now your location for people around here, it's in this area. We're in Worcester on Stafford Street.
On Stafford Street,
On
Worcester Fencing Club on
Street.
Stafford Street.
What is that near? Anything like a landmark you could Let people know.
It's near the Blue Hive building. It's near.
Okay.
It's not a lot near there, really. It's across the street from a what is it? Athletic field.
Is it near the
The light bulbs, etc.
Park Ave?
It's a little bit down from Park Ave.
Okay, a little down from Park Ave.
Yeah.
How
going
long have you
west.
been there, Ken?
All right, so I started teaching at the Higgins Army Museum in 2009.
Oh, that was a great place.
It was a great place, and we miss it a lot. But
Yeah.
when that got disbanded
Yeah.
in 2013, I wanted to take my students there someplace. We wanted to continue the classes.
Sure.
So in 2013, November 2013, so almost 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago. Over 4 years ago, we took everything private, and we've been at Worcester Fencing Club ever since.
Did you buy anything actually to put into your fencing club from the Higgins?
The Higgins actually donated a lot of the practice equipment that we
Wow.
use, which was very nice of them.
Very nice. Yeah, that is
Very, very
terrific.
nice, and we were very happy with that. So that was really nice. So I've got that practice equipment, which formed the nucleus of what we're using now. This is all my personal stuff. We've
Yeah.
since.
When are the classes, Ken? When would people be going? What would days?
So we have classes at 6:30 to 8 o'clock on Tuesdays, and from 12:30 to 2 on Saturdays. I'm also
Wow.
available for private lessons, and also groups, birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, christenings.
How do
not
you get
christenings,
people
bar
who are
mitzvahs.
they want to try it but they're a little like, ooh, I'm afraid I'm going to get stabbed.
Well, you are going to get stabbed, but not fatally.
Yeah, you'll feel it, right?
It's not harmful, but I mean you get your toes wet, right? I never
Yeah.
throw anybody in with my biggest scariest student and say, okay, now go fight your first day.
Oh yeah.
It's you don't get thrown in the deep end. You kind of I kind of go step by step, and first I teach the mechanics, I teach movement, I teach how to move, then we go into basic mechanical drills, and then we start doing more tactical drills, and then before you know it, you're actually fencing. But it goes in a very safe and progressive and non-scary way.
Ken, where do you give presentations? Do you have anything coming up about this, or when are you teaching classes?
Besides teaching my classes.
Other than yeah, sure.
Well, this weekend we're actually doing a tournament. A couple of my students and I are going down to a tournament in Long Island. But we'll be. I think our next demonstration will be at the Aresia Science Fiction Convention.
Where is that?
It's in Boston, the Westin Waterfront, and that's in January.
Okay.
And then we'll be doing. We do all sorts of demonstrations and things like that. Renaissance fairs, other places.
How about
So-
that King Richard's? that
Not
they're
so much
having?
King Richards. King Richards is his own thing, and they've got
Yeah.
their own cast.
What's
and
more
their
of a
own
kind of a
thing.
craft thing too? But have they ever invited you? I would think it would be amazing to have you come on.
Well, they have a joust troupe there who do choreographed fights and things like that. So they have actors, and there's a very big difference between stage combat
yeah.
and what we do. What we do is we're actually trying to hit one another.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between stage combat and what we do, we might see at a Renaissance fair
Yeah.
or on TV, is that in stage combat, you are trying to show a third party, the audience, what you're doing while working with your partner and not hitting them. Whereas what we're doing is we don't care about the audience.
Yeah.
People can be watching like any athletic event, but so we're not showing them anything.
No, your
Instead, I'm
focus
trying
is
to
on,
deceive you
Right.
in order to not work with you, to thwart your intents, and to actually hit you.
Yeah.
So in many ways, it's diametrically opposed to that. So the idea is very different. Also, of course, in stage combat, you're playing a character, and the idea of the simulated violence is to forward the plot, right? It's really about the characters and the plot. Whereas what we're doing, it's really about us as individuals and our own development as fencers and as people.
We're talking with Ken Mondschein, and he is a fencing master, PhD. What is your favorite era in fencing? And what really intrigued you a lot? Was it maybe France, Scotland, or... and I'm also thinking, where did this really begin the most? Was it, well, of course, obviously medieval. Did a lot of it come from Scotland or from one of the particular countries?
Well, where most of our sources on longsword, they tend to be German,
German.
because the Germans had this folk tradition, as it were, of longsword fencing, and many people, and they also had high literacy rates, and many people wrote these things down. So we've got some good records from Germany of longsword, but also in Italy. A lot of people wrote things down in Italy. Again, highly literate and urbanized.
I would thought it would be Celtic,
environment.
very Celtic, I would think. No?
No, we don't actually have a lot
I would think.
from Celtic nations. From Scotland, almost nothing, and then mostly 18th century. It's people didn't write that sort of things down, because to write down these things involves a bunch of things. You have to be literate, and you have to
Yeah.
have an audience.
That's right.
So that involves having a consumer class. So you have to have a certain social and economic environment that goes with writing down sources. France, similarly, we have relatively little. The French certainly had traditions. We have later accounts of them.
But why was
they
Germany
didn't write it
so
down.
up literally? Why were they so ahead of the game?
Well, it had a lot to do with what was going on in Germany, which at that time wasn't Germany, of course. It was the Holy Roman Empire,
Oh, yeah.
which is this loose confederation of a few hundred principalities underneath the nominal control of someone who had the ironic title of the Holy Roman Emperor,
Yeah.
who's neither holy nor Roman nor the Empire, who, by the 15th century, it was the House of Habsburg, who were from modern Austria. So when I say Germany, I mean the German-speaking zone, including
Sure.
Austria, and stretching eastwards into what's now Poland and even further. So,
I'm so surprised. I would have thought this would be Celtic all the way.
no, not Celtic.
I'm amazed.
Very little. We have very little. We have nothing really. And I know
Not even the
that's Celtic.
Crusaders. Not even the Crusaders were big on this.
They didn't write things down. The first source we have is
Yeah.
not till 1325.
Not even pictures, right? Really?
Well, certainly pictures, yes, but
Yeah.
certainly no explanatory texts.
Yeah.
Because you need to have the intellectual movement to write things down, and it wasn't really until the 14th century that really we get this idea, contemporary with my other big interest, which is timekeeping, the history of timekeeping, that we can represent all things on a page. And not coincidentally, they also had sophisticated clocks at that time. If you think about what Nicholas
Yeah.
Acusa said about a clock, is that a clock may only show one moment, the time at that particular moment, but it contains within itself the mechanism to show all times.
Yeah.
In the same way, a fencing book, even though fencing is something that takes place in space and time, and my overriding intellectual interest is how time and space are represented on the page in books in the Western intellectual tradition. Fencing certainly comes into that, because fencing, if you think about it, is something that takes place in time and space.
Yeah.
So how do you represent that? And it's not until you have some pretty sophisticated mental structures
Yeah.
that you're able to represent that
And the verbal
on
ability,
space.
right?
And you need a technical terminology, right? You
Yeah.
need certainly they probably had technical terminology.
Yeah.
We have that from records of things and other sources well before they wrote fencing books. But the idea of trying to represent all the potentialities of a sword fight on a page, well, that's interesting. That's sort of a
Yeah.
clockwork. You have to have it's almost, if you think about it, a clockwork sword fight, or a
Yeah.
clockwork universe, or at least be able to reduce the various movements that might happen to a sort of clockwork, which isn't to say that it's going to be only go in one direction the way that a clock would, but rather that there's various sophisticated interactions and moving parts going in, more like a medieval clock where you might have various automata.
Sure. Not in Asia either. Not so much in Asia. I would think, you see some of the Japanese movies, you would think that they would have had some swords and.
Well, certainly they did have these in Japan.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
That they had many of the usually perhaps somewhat later than European, but many of the family schools of swordsmanship would have scrolls, but these were things that were very much kept close to the chest, that these were not widely shared.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not a sinologist or a Japanologist, but my understanding of this is that they did have these that were more records of techniques that things wouldn't be lost, that they would be set down. I don't think, then some works of philosophy, of course, intended to transmit things to later generations, some of which, of course, have been published. For instance, The Sword in the Mind is the Yagu, I believe the Yaguru school of swordsmanship. Now, I've never studied Japanese swordsmanship, so
I bet you're one heck of a good history teacher, because listening to you, I'm just drawn in. I mean, those students are lucky. And you're teaching at which college? Anna Maria?
Mm-hmm.
And it's history per se, American history, everything? Or
Currently, well, I'll be teaching course based on Game of Thrones and Medieval
Ooh.
Art of War
I know someone who
next
would love
semester.
that.
Yeah, next semester. But
Oh.
right now I teach history from really the Middle Ages to the French Revolution, and as sort of a survey course. But yeah, I try to make things very relevant
I think
to.
back in high school I wasn't that great in history, but boy, for some reason I would love it now.
Well, it'd be, if you had me as a history teacher, I'm sure it'd be a lot more interesting.
Well,
but-
see, that's it. You draw people in. We're talking again with Ken Mondschein, and he is a fencing master. He's a PhD. Ken, again, how can they reach you? Maybe go to your classes in Worcester.
Well, reach me. It's fairly simple on the internet, historicalfencing.org, or you can email me. My email is on the website, and we're at Worcester Fencing Club, which is on Stafford Street in Worcester, of course. I'm also at Pioneer Valley Fencing Academy in East Hampton.
And don't worry about being skewered, because they do give you protection.
We do give you masks
You
and
do that. You're
jackets.
not going to be,
Impaled.
You're not going to be on the menu, that type of thing. Ken, I think this is great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad I saw that article about you. I said, it's so different, and I don't hear about it. We've got it because I'm sure there are people out there that would really be interested, I would think, in this type of thing. Just hearing you talk about it. We got to get you on now. You know WBZ in Boston?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you ever listen to Bradley J at 12 midnight? You probably don't.
I don't. Not. I'm asleep by then.
All right. Well, he's one of these hip guys that he'll have any topic on, and this is fantastic. That's really cool and interesting to people.
I'm still
Hey.
waiting for Terry Gross to call me.
I think that would be great. Really good. Thanks, Ken,
Yeah.
for coming out here.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. We'll see you next time, I
Cool.
guess.
Thanks.